Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise today at adjournment proceedings. I have to say the hour is awfully appropriate, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to be following up on a question I asked in question period on May 2nd related to what are called small modular reactors and their connection to nuclear proliferation. So it certainly is appropriate that the clock is approaching midnight. It reminds me very much that there is something called a doomsday clock that is kept up to date by the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. I just checked it and it shows we're 100 seconds to midnight. The combined factors of increased threats of nuclear war brought on by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as well as the significant risk to the whole planet brought on by the climate crisis. Mr. Speaker, these issues are related, and I related them in my question in the House on May 2nd. The answer from the Minister of Natural Resources was not sufficient, and that's why I've brought it forward this evening. The so-called small modular reactors are not part of any solution to the climate crisis. Moreover, they are untested and essentially experimental. And lastly, I again draw the attention of this place to the risk of nuclear proliferation. Just to walk through those 3 points in the time I have, the Minister of Natural Resources has said frequently in this place that there is no pathway to climate solutions that doesn't include small modular reactors. That's simply not true. Reducing greenhouse gases involves phasing out fossil fuels, canceling the TMX pipeline, not pursuing Bay du Nord. These are tangible things that have nothing to do with nuclear. Nuclear is actually in the way. It's highly expensive per ton of carbon reduced. It's about the most expensive way you can go. And it also has a long timeline before you see any results from a decision to go with nuclear. The fact that these reactors are untested and essentially experimental has not had enough attention in this country. I turned to an expert in the area, Professor Alison McFarlane, as a source. She is actually the former chairperson of the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, currently at the University of British Columbia. And what she says, and I quote, and she told this to the CBC, "Nobody knows what the numbers are, and anybody who gives you numbers is selling you a bridge to nowhere because they don't know." Quote, again, nobody has ever set up a molten salt reactor and used it to produce electricity, close quote. Now, a molten salt reactor is exactly what the government of Canada and the government of New Brunswick are throwing tens of millions of dollars at a private sector operator who proposes and has been approved to go ahead and build well, it's being reviewed at this moment, but the money's flowing towards a molten salt reactor that will use plutonium from the spent fuel of Point Lepreau in order to create this unproven technology and allegedly produce electricity. It's all very much in question, except for one thing. There's a huge risk in taking plutonium from spent fuel. It's the kind of risk that existing nuclear non-proliferation treaties are very careful to prevent us from doing. If we are promoting a global plutonium economy, even a tiny infinitesimal amount of plutonium in the hands of terrorists could create a dirty bomb, but in the hands of other countries around the world, there's the very large risk that they will produce a nuclear weapon. We had this experience in 1974 when Canada gave India one of our CANDU reactors. Well, it turns out that these new SMR reactors, and this was just recently in the Globe and Mail this week, produce far more nuclear waste than conventional reactors, 2 times to 30 times more. So I asked the government, think twice. This is a mistake. This is radioactive snake oil.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. I'll just give this a second to clear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will state at the outset that on this matter, our government's top priority is to protect the health, safety, and security of Canadians and our environment. As the member opposite knows, Canada is recognized for having one of the world's most comprehensive climate plans. We recently updated with new details and targets to illustrate how we'll reach our ambitious 2030 target, which is to cut emissions by at least 40% below 2005 levels. This update includes $9.1 billion in new investments to help us drive towards our goal to create more than 1 million jobs while making clean growth the cornerstone of our economic future. Our climate plan includes, for instance, measures to spur the development of next-generation technologies to bring more clean power onto our grids, encourage greater use of public transit and zero-emission vehicles, and make homes and businesses more energy efficient. We also see great potential for the development of non-emitting hydrogen. In fact, Germany's ambassador to Canada said recently that we have the potential to become a global hydrogen superpower. And yes, nuclear also plays a role in our plan. Why do I say that? Because nuclear already plays a big role. It's the second largest source of non-emitting electricity in Canada after hydro, generating roughly 60% of Ontario's electricity and close to 40% of New Brunswick's. And the fact is, the International Energy Agency has repeatedly made it clear that getting to net zero will require an acceleration in nuclear energy generation around the world. So Canada is among a number of nations supporting research into small modular reactors, also known as SMRs. We are also working with interested provincial governments that are responsible for making decisions on electricity generation projects. Our support is reflected in our SMR action plan, unveiled in late 2020, and most recently in Budget 2022, which included $69.9 million over 5 years to advance the development of this technology. This also included the provision of $50.7 million and an ongoing $500,000 annually after that to help the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission develop the capacity to regulate this emerging sector. As for the company the member opposite cited, we are supporting Multec's plan to use recycled CANDU reactor fuel, giving us a chance to further extract energy from a used resource. But the member and all Canadians should be confident that safety and security remain paramount. Canada remains a signatory to and a strong advocate of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. This means we implement all the safeguards set by the International Atomic Energy Agency to ensure nuclear materials are used solely for peaceful purposes in Canada. Mr. Speaker, most Canadians know the member opposite has long urged Canadians to take climate crisis seriously. We on this side hope the honourable member will soon see, as other environmentalists have, that solar and wind power alone will never get us to net zero. To succeed, we must explore all possible solutions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
I'm very sorry that the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary continues to spout the sort of things that I guess Liberals alone could possibly believe, that Canada has a climate plan that is admired in the rest of the world. We are known, when I go to international conferences, Canada is known as a laggard country. We have the worst record in the G7. And by hitching our wagon to net zero by 2050, we are threatening our very own children with an unlivable world, because the targets that must be met occur in the next 30 months. Not the next 3 decades. So to my honourable colleague, I will not ever close my mind to any solution for the climate crisis. But SMR reactors are not a solution. They're in the way. The opportunity cost of putting millions of dollars into an unproven technology with existing risks of exacerbating our nuclear waste problem, it is an absolutely bogus notion that we're going to recycle nuclear waste and it's going to be good for all of us. No, it creates more waste and it threatens our safety in terms of proliferation.
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is a leading producer of uranium and a globally recognized pioneer in the safe development of nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. Our industry has been a catalyst for Nobel Award-winning science, and with our planet facing a climate crisis, it is no time to turn our backs on this proud industry. The fact is, to reach our targets, we need to explore all options, including nuclear. If commercially viable SMRs could play a role in cutting emissions. It could also help remote, northern, and Indigenous communities reduce their dependence on diesel. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.